First I'm making theories, then FNAF theories, now a full-on timeline. I told you, I'm becoming him! Hello everyone, and happy Five Nights at Freddy's anniversary. 10 years! It's very, very exciting to see how far everything has come. It was FNAF that inspired me to be who I am today. The idea that one person can make a game all by themselves was so fascinating to me. I dreamt of making a multiplayer FNAF game ever since, and look, here we are. It's out, people love it, and I'm so freaking stoked. It was actually while I was working on Five Nights Together that I got the idea for this video. I was listening to streams by the YouTuber known as Psychic. Psychic would gather a group of FNAF theorists for some friendly debates on the community's most controversial questions.
Okay, let me just,
Oh boy.
Very fun to listen to. I really recommend checking those out, but as I was listening, I noticed that there were a lot of disagreements on the story of FNAF 1 to 6. Questions like, when does Sister Location take place? Who do we play as in FNAF 4? Even I found myself a bit puzzled over these questions, and I thought, that can't be right. According to Scott, the story of FNAF 1 to 6 has been wrapped up, concluded. In Daco's interview, Scott mentioned that he only began working with third-party studios like Steel Wool and Illumix after he told the story he wanted to tell.
For the longest time, I wasn't willing to sign on with any companies because I was keeping the series too tight under wraps. You know, I really wanted to be protective of the story.
Meaning that everything that happened afterwards should be seen as a new beginning. I personally have titled these stories The Remnant Saga and The Agony Saga. The point I'm trying to make is that The Remnant Saga is a story that Scott believes is conclusive. So I sat down and tried to see if I could piece together a timeline. And boy, did I find some surprisingly satisfying answers. And before I get into this, I should clarify, unlike other timeline videos, I'm not here to answer every single question FNAF has ever had. I'm only going to be addressing events that are 100% confirmed and clicking them together in the order that I think they happened. For example, some things I won't be talking about are Midnight Motorist, the origin of the Shadow animatronics, the identity of Golden Freddy, and so forth. If something brought me even the tiniest bit of doubt, I didn't put it in here. Luckily, I don't think any of those things are really important to this first story, so that being said, let's do this. We know that the earliest point we have seen in these games is Fredbear's Family Diner. We know thanks to Ruin that the diner opened in the 70s, then years later, they opened a sister location known as Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in 1983. Seems like things were going pretty well. Henry and William had two massive restaurants with a show and merch galore. So what happened? What caused the spiral of murder and suffering we know today? Well, I do believe it was the bite. Michael, with the help of his friends, tossed his brother into Fredbear's mouth and got him killed. This is the only death we've seen that was a complete accident. No murder intent whatsoever. But to further explain why this started everything, I'd like to bring your attention to FNAF 6. Odd I know, but hear me out. While running your pizzeria in FNAF 6, you can occasionally get a lawsuit. While a lot of these are just made to be funny, one of them caught my eye. His head was bitten by an animatronic. While I'm not trying to say this is the same event, it does tell us something very important. It tells us exactly how a parent would react to the scenario. They're angry at Fazbear Entertainment for their failure to comply with safety. It's safe to assume that William was angry at Henry, and it makes sense. Henry was always cutting corners. It's a habit he carries all the way to FNAF 6.
Cutting corners is just good business.
He designed the super dangerous spring lock suits just so he could save money. No wonder William would be upset. Henry's cheapness and complete lack of care has now directly affected him. The games give us zero other reason to believe William would be mad at Henry. The only way to say William was mad before this is to fill in blanks ourselves, which we're not here to do. The bite definitely has to be first. It's my belief that this led to William's first kill. Henry took William's kid, so William would take his, an eye for an eye, making the next event on the timeline the death of Charlotte Emily and the birth of a murderer. We know for certain that this was William's first kill because of Henry's words in FNAF 6.
A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this.
And if you've ever heard any real-life murder stories, you'd know that a first kill is usually a gateway to a bad addiction, leading to the creation of Circus Baby's Pizza World in 1985, featuring animatronics that were designed to lure and murder children. A few kids got to go in for testing, but the location never opened. Reportedly, it was because of gas leaks, but local residents believed something else was to blame, and that something else was the death of yet another one of William's kids, Elizabeth Afton. Why do I place this event before the missing children's incident? Well, thanks to the new game, Into the Pit, we know that Circus Baby's Pizza World was being advertised at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza before the missing children's incident, meaning that William had already been building murder machines before that day. And like I said earlier, we know that Circus Baby's Pizza World never opened. There were only a few kids let in for testing. So we know that when Baby recalls kids running around at her pizzeria before killing Elizabeth, we know that she's referring to those tests.
Did you know that I was on stage once? It wasn't for very long, only one day.
After Elizabeth's death and the murder plan being shut down, William returns to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza to take the lives of more children. This time, he was caught on camera leading the kids away, but because no one ever found the bodies, they couldn't prove that he killed them. He got away with it, but Freddy's didn't. Blood dripped from the suits, more and more customers were lost, and they just couldn't stay in business, leading to the closure of the first Freddy's. But it didn't take long for Henry to bounce back, launching a new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. At first, he tried to upgrade the original animatronics, but ultimately thought they were too ugly. Instead, he used their parts to build all new versions, the toy animatronics. But what Henry didn't know is that those old animatronic parts were haunted, alive, and because he had used those to build the toys, now so were they. Something borrowed to create something new. But that's not all this location had to worry about. As long as Freddy's kept opening, William would always come back, taking 5 more lives. The animatronics tried to save the kids, but they couldn't, and they were not happy about it.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
With the toys going crazy, they were scrapped and the location was shut down. But once again, Henry rebrands, creating the third Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, repurposing the original animatronics with a much smaller budget. But the damage had been done, and the business failed one final time. This was the end of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. But by now, William had noticed something intriguing. The animatronics were possessed. They were alive. Curious, he came back and tore them apart. In the same way that the haunted endos brought the toys to life, Afton was able to bring his own creations to life. One by one, he took the haunted endos for himself and melted them down. Suddenly, he had living metal he could inject into anything. And after upgrading the fun times with state-of-the-art technology, he pitched them to Fazbear Entertainment with a brilliant idea.
These are clearly state-of-the-art.
If the pizzerias kept getting shut down, stop opening pizzerias. Instead, just sell animatronics, a rental service. Circus Babies, Entertainment, and Rental. Now, the placement of this location in the timeline has been a debate for a while. The reason I am so confident that this happens after FNAF 1 is all thanks to the upcoming interactive book The Week Before, a story about a night guard that's said to take place a week before the events of the first game.
I actually worked in that office before you. I'm finishing up my last week now, as a matter of fact.
Now that we know Phone Guy's shift was only a week before FNAF 1, we can now confirm that the FNAF 1 pizzeria was in fact open while Mike was working there, meaning that Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals was not, an idea that wasn't able to start until Freddy's finally failed.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
You also have to remember that FNAF 2 explicitly states that the original endos were still being reused for the third pizzeria, meaning that William hadn't taken them apart for Remnant until after the third pizzeria, further solidifying sister location as after FNAF 1. But nothing was ever enough for William. He kept coming back to that old Freddy's again and again, squeezing it dry. The kids caught on. He will come back. He always does. It was his weakness, making it extremely easy to spring a trap. William went missing, but even so, things continued on without him. His son, Mike, who had been working at every Freddy's thus far, got a job at Circus Babies Entertainment and Rental. But this time, he wasn't just dealing with the confused animalistic spirits. This time, he was dealing with Baby, his dear old sister. She'd been down here for years and years. She grew smart, she learned, and by now, she had the perfect plan to escape through Michael's skin. Now this is the point that we get to my favorite discovery. This is the point that FNAF 4 takes place. I know that probably sounds bizarre, but hear me out. There's a lot of debate over who we play as in FNAF 4. Always has been. Some people think we're the crying child, some people think we're Mike, but that debate has tripled ever since the reveal of one of the latest stories, Dudophobia, a story that reveals the use of FNAF 4 gas experiments under surveillance in the sister location bunker. Something that we know is directly canon to the games, as we see the FNAF 4 bedroom on surveillance and hooked up to several sets of gas tanks. It's because of this that people have begun to question if we play as Rory, the kid from the book. But no, I'm sticking with this here. I'm 100% confident that we play as Mike, and that we play as Mike after sister location. In the ambience of FNAF 4, we hear this. Which doesn't sound like much until you put it in reverse. That is the entire Night 1 phone call from Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Rory wouldn't be hearing that all the way down here in a bunker, and a call from the distant future wouldn't be heard by the crying child. It can only be Mike, and only after he's been through FNAF 1. Mike is dreaming as an adult. Additionally, we see from the security logbook that Mike is able to draw Nightmare Fredbear perfectly, confirming that at some point before this book, Mike has seen Nightmare Fredbear enough times that he's memorized every detail. And I know what you're thinking, Arthur, these details only prove that Mike had nightmares after FNAF 1, not sister location, and that has indeed been the consensus. is. I've seen many people take the FNAF movie, which presents the spirits infiltrating Mike's dreams, as an explanation for the FNAF 4 nightmares. Many people believe that at some point during FNAF 1, the spirits infiltrated Mike's dreams, and I was inclined to agree with this. I was even going to put that in this video. As I established earlier, we know that the gas experiments happened in this room, and we also know thanks to the phone call memory that Mike is definitely dreaming. So why on earth would Mike be dreaming about real experiment rooms if it wasn't Mike's close proximity with the spirits? There's no other reason spirits would be in Mike's head, right? Until I realized what happens to Mike in Sister Location. He got scooped. In FNAF 6, we learned that the scooper is a remnant injector, and in the novels, we actually get to see what happens when someone is injected with remnant. The spirits get into their head. Applying this to Sister Location would mean that Mike would have the spirits in his head. To me, this places FNAF 4 confidently after Sister Location. In fact, this would make more sense. None of the 5 missing children would have had any memories in this room, but if suddenly there was a mysterious extra kid thrown into the mix, one that maybe wasn't supposed to die, where do you think that would have happened?
This is how it feels. And you get to experience it over and over and over again. Forever.
But I digress. This point is a bit more on the speculative side. I'm not really sure what I believe in terms of UCN, so let's get back to the timeline. By this point, Mike fully understands what his father had done, and what he himself had done to start it all. He deems himself responsible, and vows to help these kids by finding his father, and he does. Okay, oddly enough, I feel like this point right here is going to be one of the most controversial takes in the video. A big chunk of the community believes that Hudson, a character from their books, is the FNAF 3 guard. But even as a Stitchline Games believer, I've looked through it and I don't really think so. First off, it's important to remember that Scott told us some stories are connected directly to the games and some not. And this is just one of those stories that is impossible to connect. Hudson only deals with Springtrap for one night and spends it roaming the building instead of sticking to the office. Nothing about this lines up with FNAF 3. There's different rooms, different events. I'm sorry, but I really can't find a way to spin this as game canon. FNAF has always had its inconsistencies, but they're usually perfectly explainable. But no matter how hard I try to stretch this one, it just doesn't work. I'm also very confident that FNAF 3 is the point that Mike fills out the security logbook. At the beginning of every chapter, there's a header image of the FNAF 3 office. An office that you have to remember isn't from an official Freddy's location. I doubt Henry would need to buy all this stuff from his own auction. Fazbear's Fright is just some bootleg attraction, meaning that it wouldn't be referenced at any official establishments. This book is 100% an activity book made for Fazbear's Fright, for roleplay purposes. With that in mind, we can conclude that Mike has to be the night guard in FNAF 3. It also reconfirms that Mike has been through FNAF 1, 2, 4, and Sister Location. And yes, I said 2. I'm not sure if Mike is Fritz Smith, or if maybe Mike was the mystery guard before Jeremy that chickened out.
The first guy finished his week, but complained about conditions. We switched him over to the day shift.
But I can confidently say that at some point, Mike had worked at that location. Most of the phantoms, besides Chica, are FNAF 2 animatronics, and I can tell you with confidence that they're most likely hallucinations in your mind and not the real spirits.
Look, this place will give you the spooks, man, and if you let that ventilation go offline, then you'll start seeing some crazy stuff, man. Keep that air flowing.
At some point in the game, you will stumble across the real puppet standing in the hallway, but the moment you see her, you're suddenly met with the phantom puppet right in front of your face. A design that is clearly different from the puppet you saw on the camera. This is a hallucination, and this is the real puppet. And once Fazbear Frights burned down, both her and Springtrap roamed free. Along with Ennard, that made 3 rogue animatronics, or should I say 4. You see, Ennard was made up from the split souls of the missing kids, but included in the batch was Elizabeth. She wasn't one of them, so they booted her out. Now on her own, she donned her original suit, and she wasn't the only one feeling nostalgic. It's at this point that Henry likely catches whiff of the situation. The fun times were missing. William Afton had been missing, and after looking into it, it was worse than he thought. He discovered blueprints upon blueprints of the horrible things William had done, learning about Remnant, learning about the living machines, and learning about the Scooper.
It's only now that I understand the depth of the depravity of this creature, this monster that I unwillingly helped to create. I don't know how those tiny breaths of life came to inhabit those machines, but they will never find rest now, not like this. I have to call them all back, all of them, together in one place.
It's here where the story ends, with Henry and Michael, the two whose carelessness started everything, luring everyone to one place and activating a trap specifically meant to burn and crush every single remnant of the tragedy they created.
Symmetry, my friend!
Who the hell?
Or so they thought, as the agony of this tragedy was far from faded. And that's it. Like I said before, this doesn't answer everything, but I do believe this is the story Scott was trying to tell. I think what makes me so confident is that if you were to go back in time, before Help Wanted, before the Frights books, you'd see that this story has always been there. It's only been further supported as the years went on. And I think that's how FNAF should be looked at. The new stories will surely make the old picture clearer and clearer, but it has always been there. Scott adds new stories, but he doesn't change the old story. I think that if we can remember that as our #1 rule moving forward, the future of FNAF will be bright. Until then, let me know what you think of the timeline. I'd love to have a discussion in the comments, because no matter how solid I think it is, you gotta remember, that's just a theory. A game!